that beautiful sharing and prayer. And Cheryl, it was nice. Yesterday and now, so far, we have heard four different speakers other than me. I only gave an overview, but then other four people have given us different perspectives. And see, there is no way you can summarize this encyclical, because each para is very important and it is very simple. Our Pope has used very basic, simple language, and every para, when you read, there is a lot that we understand and there is a lot to do. That is how it is. And I'm going to run a presentation. There are some images, and images are very powerful. I think they are self-explanatory. I'm not going to take too long, maybe 20 minutes. There are about 40 slides, but then we are going to run through them quickly. And I'm going to explain a few things, because the topic here is about vulnerable and frail, how to take care of them, and what does the encyclical say about this. Now, these first few images are what we have been hearing yesterday and today. Speakers have mentioned about this. These are world leaders. Pope met them, and in the introduction itself, beginning, he speaks about this. We'll go to next. This is that famous image of Saint Francis, who felt like a brother to the sun, sea, and wind, knew that he was ever more united with those who live in the body just like him. Sister Inigo spoke beautifully about that image yesterday. Without borders, we heard this several times. This is the visit to Sultan Malik al-Kamil in Egypt. This is Saint Francis of Assisi going there. And that is the inspiration. And I think we have made this mention several times yesterday and today, where Pope met great Imam Ahmad al-Tayyib in the introduction chapter, para 5, Pope speaks about this. Now, we are going to quickly see what is it saying about caring for the frail and vulnerable. Who are these people? There are again a few images quickly. Just see these images. I think they are self-explanatory, and these are the people he talks about. And our speakers have already mentioned about these groups of different groups or categories of people who are vulnerable. Now this crowd there you see, the blacks, and because of racism, and you know the person there on your screen who spoke against that. Let us dream as one humanity, Pope Francis says in FT8, as travelers made of the same human flesh, as children of the same land that hosts us all, each with the riches of his faith or his convictions, each with his own voice, all as brothers. Another image there, that was Floyd in America. We know what happened there. Look at this image now. We are talking about frail and vulnerable, and in para 11, he speaks about these people. In this image, you see a man, and there is another category of people. Now you can create a picture of Good Samaritan, how people just looked at the person who was lying there and walked away, to ignore the fact that many of our brothers and sisters still suffer from situations of injustice that require all of us to act. Most of the times we are like those bystanders. Look at these two images here. Vulnerable, we are talking about vulnerable. There are local conflicts and a lack of interest in the common good are instrumentalized by the global economy. We heard about globalization yesterday, and how because of that there are groups created today because they are either poor or they are uprooted. That is what Pope says. An increasing globalization, go back to the previous one. An increased globalized society brings us closer but does not make us brothers and sisters. Because look at those children. Most of these are laborers and workers, construction workers. Now they have no school, they have no proper meals. They are just like that. They are left out there. So that is the society. These are the vulnerable that Pope talks about. Look at this image; is very powerful. We are more than ever alone. Another group of vulnerable people in the massive world, which priority to individual interests and weakens the community dimension of existence. People are becoming more and more individualistic today. This is the famous tag line of Nokia, the phone when it came. It says connecting people, but actually it does not connect. But these devices, these gadgets have made people know to isolate themselves, to go away. I always give this example. We had a birthday celebration of a priest. Actually, all of us gathered, and one of them was celebrating his birthday that day. And the priest was there next to us, and all of us were sending messages to him and wishing. None of us actually went and shook hand with him, hugged him. No, that kind of culture, and that is where we are becoming vulnerable more and more. Even digitization is also adding more and more to this. In this conflict of interest, look at this image again. There is a man lying there. He says, "I have AIDS. I need little money to go back home." That is the poster there he has put. But then there are bystanders there. There are people who are walking around. They are busy, but no one really cares for this man. FT16 talks about this. Another big group in Delhi, most of you know, we have a place called Jantar Mantar, where big groups used to come. As a student of Vidyajyoti, we used to go there, and whenever there was something, we always sat there in protest. But today, that place is cleared off. There are no people there. Now, today you can't raise voice. You become vulnerable. Now, this is an NGO called Greenpeace. I think in India, they have shut their operation now because of FCRA issues. But most of the times, even farmers, you can compare a lot of other groups, the comedians in our own country, the activists, they are silenced. Now they become vulnerable. How? Because of certain policies. These are the images, they are self-explanatory, what is happening in our own country. Now this in 18 and 19, these two paras, these images come very strongly. Look at this image, unborn child. Global rejection, in a sense, people are no longer seen as a core value that must be respected and protected, especially if they are poor or disabled. Not yet useful, that is about unborn children, or they are no longer needed, like the elderly people. He talks about them, and this is very obvious. I think this is seen. Pope is talking about this, but you go around in our own families, many families, I think the elderly are abandoned or they are sent to old age homes. Where I'm staying, just behind this, there is an old age home. It is full. There are many places that there is no place today because they are of no use. That is how people are considering them. We do not realize that. Now, this is what Pope is saying. Isolating the elderly and leaving them in the care of strangers, that is in old age homes, without a proper and close one relationship of the family, cripples and impoverishes the family itself. What he is trying to say is the knowledge, the traditions, the culture that has to be handed over to the younger generations, the next generation. A child, maybe grandchild, needs to learn a lot from his grandparents, which is not happening. And that is where these kids are. Pope is saying they're uprooted from this kind of culture, and they are planted somewhere and where that growth is not complete. Next. Now, in this background, Pope Francis has decided to institute a church-wide celebration of a World Day of Grandparents and the Elderly. That is the beautiful thing that he has done. Starting this year, that is 2021, it will be held on the fourth Sunday of July, close to the liturgical memorial of Saint Joachim and grandparents of Jesus. Now, these are a few things that our Pope is doing. Look at this group of vulnerable people. We have seen frail and vulnerable. The rejection is expressed in many ways today, such as obsession with reducing labor costs without taking into account the serious consequences it causes, as unemployment as a direct consequence widens the poverty line. Safety 20 speaks about this, and we have seen this last year, 2020, number of them losing their jobs, not only because of COVID-19, because of government policies. Human rights, not universal enough. Today, human rights, you speak about human rights, you become vulnerable. We have the example for the stand, Mr. Varavara Rao. There are many such people, human rights activists. They're vulnerable today because the moment they raise voice, they are silenced. We had Lankesh and many such people. Many forms of injustice persist in the world today, reinforced by narrow anthropological visions and by a profit-based economic model, and does not hesitate to exploit, reject, or even kill man or human beings. Now, that is how many countries are operating today. We heard about this yesterday, that women have exactly the same dignity and rights as men. Sister Inigo spoke about this, and we need to realize sometimes, when they become vulnerable, I think the 50% that she spoke yesterday were not there. She gave the example of Swami Agnivesh. Now, this is what we are talking today, because we are equals in every field, anything that we do. And then if you make someone vulnerable, I think we need to reflect on that. That is what Pope says. Because of conflict and wars, he talks about these things. There is war, there is death, and because of that, there are a lot of people who are uprooted again, and they become vulnerable. We will see in the next. I'm not going to read it is there for your reference. Fratelli Tutti 25 speaks about this, how powerful nations sometimes they exploit the poor countries, and that is how these poor countries become vulnerable. Thus, our world develops in a meaningless dichotomy, imagining providing stability and peace based on a false security supported by a mentality of fear and distrust. You scare someone, you have sanctions, like we are doing now. India is doing slowly. It used to be earlier powerful countries like US or United States or Russia or China. Now there are sanctions, and then people have to follow their ways of doing things. That is what Pope says. These rich countries are trying to impose their culture on these people, and that is when you become vulnerable, and then you forget all your culture, everything, because you are vulnerable, and then you start following what the powerful is trying to impose or trying to tell you. He reappears the temptation to create a culture of walls, erect walls in the heart, walls on the ground, to prevent this meeting with other cultures and with other people. Now, it reappears. Actually, you saw what happened in Mexico. We know what is happening in our own borders and many other places. No, people want to meet. People want to talk. There are some good people. I have even heard in our own country, celebrities who visited our neighboring countries, they come back and they talk something good about those people, but they are considered anti-nationals. Immediately, and then there's trolling, then there is enmity, and then they are silenced. That is how it works today, and that is how we become vulnerable. Look at this image. These are migrants. We do not know how many were drowned in that. They impose themselves as protectors sometimes. These countries, we are talking about governments and countries of the forgotten, often through various forms, help by pursuing its criminal interest. There is a pedagogy, typically mafia, which in a false community spirit creates bonds of dependence and subordination from which it is very difficult to break free. This is what I said. This kind of mafia is created by these powerful countries. No human dignity. This image is very powerful. You look at those kids, they become vulnerable later. There's women sometimes there. Now these are migrants or also people from war torn countries. They're going away. They are also called migrants. Now often what happens, linked to drug cartels and arms smuggling, they take advantage of the weakness of these migrants, who all too often encounter violence, trafficking in human beings, psychological and physical exploitation, and indescribable suffering. Now, if you find someone doing this, maybe they were vulnerable. Now, that is how they are misused and abused sometimes. We do not know where these children will land up, where these women will land up. Some men we do not know, and how they will be abused later. Now, these are vulnerable groups. Next. Look at the way sometimes cops treat. Now this image is from a different country, but in our own country, you go on the net, you will see how our police here in Delhi, I'm in Delhi just now, our cops are treating farmers, barricading and fixing those nails and rails and whatnot. And that is how sometimes the people sitting there, they don't look like human beings. Now that is the difference. That is the vulnerability that we are discussing, or it is there in the encyclical Pope is talking about. He says, I encourage you to go beyond these primary responses, because the problem is when they determine our way of thinking and acting so much that we become intolerant, closed, and maybe even without realizing it, we become racist sometimes. We become like each individual, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly, because of a lot of factors that we saw. This image is, again, in FD 61, he gives this reference: you shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the life of a stranger, for you yourself were strangers in Egypt. These are some of the beautiful images of Good Samaritan. Different images you will see how abandoned people, how they are taken care of. In this, there is maybe a modern Good Samaritan, but you still see a person walking there. The other side, it must be said that we have developed a kind of mentality today that I don't care. If someone is struggling there, I don't care. Look at these images. They are typical of that kind of mentality. Now, this parable of Good Samaritan, which which is repeated, most of our speakers, I also, we talk about this because it is important. How can I become a Good Samaritan or a neighbor? This parable shows us the initiatives with which to rebuild a community, beginning with men and women who identify with the fragility of others, who do not allow building a society of exclusion, but become neighbors, raising the fallen and bringing them back to society so that the good would be common. FD 67 speaks about this. It's a very powerful image of Mother Teresa. She has done that over the years. Need not explain. FD 68 speaks about how the suffering are vulnerable sometimes. We can't let anyone just go like that. This image again, there is a man lying down there, maybe a beggar or a sick person. Those who care for someone no need to care for someone who is hurting, and those who pass by, those who bend down to help, and those who look. This is the dichotomy. This is the kind of world that we are living in. There are some who bend and do something like the Good Samaritan. There are some of us who are busy because we think about ourselves and we go the other side. Next. All these images are only explaining, but these are different paragraphs where Pope is bringing back that same idea of helping the suffering, helping the people who are on the margins. Today we have a great opportunity. In FT 77, he says, to express that we are brothers and sisters, to be yet another merciful Samaritan, taking on self the pain of failure instead of inciting hatred and resentment. Instead of doing all that Cheryl Ann was saying, using religion, using our own political affiliations, there are many such things which divide us. Instead of that, I think we can become a good Samaritan, and there are many ways we can do. That is what Pope is telling us. Next. The Samaritan was the one who became a good neighbor. He was not, as we heard already, Cheryl said, he was not his relative or brother, but still he does something. Let us care for the needs of every man and woman in 79, young and old, with the same fraternal spirit of care and closeness that marked the Good Samaritan. There are a few points here after this, what we can do. So most of the encyclical Fratelli Tutti is addressed to governments and society as a whole. Like when you read, you will get that kind of understanding, because why government is doing certain things, or political parties or top powerful economies and leaders are doing or functioning in a certain way. When you talk about globalization, when you talk about many other points that are there, but it notes that we as individual Christians and our parish communities have an obligation to take an active part in renewing and supporting our troubled societies, a responsibility to bear the pain of other people's troubles rather than fomenting greater hatred and resentment. So each one of us has a responsibility to change this order of those people who are frail and who are vulnerable. We as Christian community, especially, actually every human being, but we as Christians have a special call to do this. These last two slides here are a few suggestions to implement this teaching. With this, I conclude. Just 4 or 5 points here. It is important that all of us should read this encyclical as a group and discuss it, not only in the seminaries or in our during our recollections, but I think young people and all of us. It is written in an easy to read style that encourages conversation and discussion. Yesterday, someone asked a question, what can we do now? What is now immediate? Start locally. What are the greatest needs of the people in your community, in our community? Find ways to give voice to the voiceless and empower the powerless. That is what Pope Francis is calling us to do, these actions, and he calls them, these are the actions of charity in number 186. 1 or 2 more points there. Take a stand against narrow and violent racism, xenophobia, and contempt. Some are doing it already, many are doing, but I think all of us need to get into that kind of system, and even the mistreatment of those who are different. Yesterday, Sister Inigo was saying, when farmers are agitating or many other people, many groups, now how are we responding to this? Do we become a voice for them, or we take a stand? Most of the times, I think we stay away because we have a lot of compulsions. I think we need to break these barriers. Use your resources to support those in need. Think of a hand up rather than a handout. No, in other words, we do write a lot of things and then we talk, but then I think we need to extend our support, be there. I think that is what it means. The goal is to call forth the gifts in others that may be stifled or silenced, and to bring those gifts to the wider community. Get people working together side by side in pursuing goals that benefit everyone. Identify problems clearly, appreciate different solutions. So, in the reflection of the Good Samaritan, Pope Francis challenges us to seek out others. His others are frail and vulnerable people, and embrace the world as it is without fear, renouncing pettiness and resentment so that we can be present to those in need of help. 78 and 81. To do this, our action must foster openness and union with others through charity. As Saint John Paul II said repeatedly, do not be afraid. I think that is the courage that we require to take care of the frail and the vulnerable. I only picked up a few points from the encyclical. I have not, to be honest, done justice. The entire encyclical talks about different ways. He also says what is happening, who are these groups and people, and how to take care of them. So, suggestions and ideas are also there. Thank you very much. We have some time now for discussion.